Welcome to video session number 4 in our spiritual growth campaign, God's Twitter feed. And I hope you've been following along in your book. It's a place for you to journal and a place for you to be inspired and to read the devotionals that we have for you. Make sure that you participate in your community group by actually participating and speaking up and sharing your heart as well. Now, I'm going to talk about how to manage money because all through Proverbs, it talks about money management. So let me tell you about the first argument I ever had with Mary about money. And here we go. She bought a dress. I mean, we'd been married, just a few weeks. And I had a conniption. I don't know the definition of the word conniption, but I had a conniption over the amount of, I don't even remember how much money it was. I just thought, what are we doing here? Because I'm a saver of money. I'm a tightwad, and Mary's a spender. Okay, so we had to come to an agreement there, and we had an argument over money. And then we agreed that from this point on, no one can spend more than $50 without consulting the other person. We lived by that rule for the next 15 years. And by over time, we began to be able to read each other. Hey, do I need to maybe consult my spouse spending this money or not? But one of the most important things that we can do in life is learn how to manage money. Economists often say that money is a tool and money is a drug. And by that they mean that money is a tool. I pay my bills with it, pay my mortgage and so forth, and buy groceries. But it's also a drug because you walk into Jerry's Home Improvements and as soon as you walk in, you see the power tools on the right, you see the paint department over here, and then all of a sudden I want to buy something. It's kind of like soothing to buy something, and that's why we say money is a drug. Now, a lot of people get themselves into trouble by spending foolishly, and they can hurt themselves and they can hurt their families as well. So here's our big idea today that we want to talk about. When we manage money wisely, we resemble our Heavenly Father. So we want to manage money wisely. Think of it this way. Being a good stewardship of what God has given us reflects the heart of God. So we want to be good managers. Today we are in a recession, I would say, due to the COVID experience, and some things are really up in the air, and maybe you've lost your job, or maybe your retirement income's gone down, or your nest egg, or maybe you graduate from college. And I've known some college students, they can't find jobs right now. It's a kind of tenuous time. And times of prosperity, it's easy not to watch your money. You just got extra money. But when things get tight, then it's even more important, to manage money well. John Rockefeller was He's a multi-billionaire of his day, and he was asked, how much money do you really need? And he said, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Can you imagine asking Bill Gates, how much money do you need? He goes, well, just a little bit more. Yeah, you see, money can be something that we can get our identity from and our security. But really, we need to trust God for our finances and trust God with our future. And our culture, our mindset is that money is everything. All the advertisements, all of the marketing goes to trying to get your money to buy something else or to invest in a product and to buy a bigger house, buy a different car, buy more equipment, whatever the case may be. And so money management can be really important. So let's look at a couple principles I want to draw out for you. Number one is this: avoid foolish debt. Just avoid that. Proverbs 22:7 says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Now, obviously, if you want to buy a house, you have a loan for that, probably. But there are all kinds of things that we can get into debt for that is really foolish. And you pull out your credit card and you just overspend and you rack up amazing amount of student debt. I'm really concerned for some of you that you have enormous student debt and it's hard to pay back and it's going to crush you for a while. Or you just have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on credit cards and it's just eating you up. So we need to be careful to avoid foolish debt, just as Proverbs 17 says. Now, does that mean we can't buy stuff and do things like? No. Let's be careful about this. Avoid foolish debt. Mary and I have sat down with many people just at this kitchen table and discussed their finances with them, especially young couples getting married. And it's always interesting to me when I say, hey, would you just write out for me on this piece of paper all of the debts that you have? And their eyes get a little big as they start writing, well, this credit card, and here we have this, and I'm behind on this bill. And, it's just word to the wise, right? Avoid foolish debt. Now, when Solomon wrote this proverb in ancient Israel, they didn't have commercial lending and those kinds of things. In fact, if you didn't pay your bill, you were literally a slave of the person, and you went to work for them, an indentured servant, until you paid your bill off. And in the same way, we have foolish debt. We can feel like a slave to the person who's holding the note on our debt. I want to give you just a little tip here. If you get nothing else out of this video session, this will help you. Spend less than you make. And if you can do that, doesn't that make sense? Spend less than you make? Then you're going to avoid getting into financial trouble. You do not want the stress of financial trouble. It's not worth it. So spend less than you make. Here's number 2, live a moderate lifestyle. Just live a moderate way. Proverbs 23 says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. This proverb is painting the picture of the person who wants to get rich quick, and all of a sudden their money flies off. It's just no longer there. It's all gone. It's all gone. I was reading about a young entrepreneur who said, I just want to make the most money I can by the time I'm 29. You dive in with that kind of thought process, you're going to end up potentially harming yourself and the people around us. Jesus warned us over and over again that greed can be a sin and that greed can be idolatrous and destroy our lives. Number 3 about money is practice a generous lifestyle. Proverbs 11:24 says this, one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. Verse 25, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. If I could say it in modern day terms, Solomon is saying this, misers are miserable. So learn to be generous. He's not saying if you give a little money here and give a little money there, you're going to be a billionaire. That's not what this is about. Let's remember, if you did the reading, that a proverb is not a promise. It's a premise. And a proverb in Hebrew thinking was, generally speaking, if I do it this way, generally speaking, life is like this, but there are no guarantees. When we give financially, we become blessed personally in our hearts. And when we learn to give our money away and we see God changing lives due to our partnering with Him, it's an incredible blessing to ourselves. I've seen it in my own life over and over and over again. And in our church, I've seen it over and over again as we give financially to causes that are gospel-centered. We get blessed by that over and over again. As I'm talking with you, I've been receiving text messages from my friends who are pastors in Myanmar. And they have an incredible need, and we've been doing things in that country to assist them in planting churches, sharing the gospel. And in fact, I've never been personally asked for money from a pastor there. But if they were to ask me right now, because they need a little help during this COVID thing, I'd be all over that. And in fact, that just happened. And our church responded to that quick need that was there from someone I've known 7 or 8 years who I knew this was a real need. You see, when we respond with generosity, we are just blessed by what's going on. Learn to be a giver, not a taker. Number 4, put financial margin in your life. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people just max out their monthly income. So they begin to think, I would like to have just a little bit bigger house. It'll cost $175 a month. And they think, I'd like to have this car, and it's going to cost just a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, they don't have any margin in their lives. And they're just stressed out. They're just so stressed out. I'm going to call this a pastor-like wisdom. Would you just make sure that you create margin in your life? In other words, don't bump up to the ceiling of your capacity. I'll tell you something else that's very helpful about that. When you see a need arise, you can respond to that quickly. You can say, man, I want to jump into that. I see what God is doing. I see that I can be generous toward that single mom. I see that retired person who could use a little bit of help right now. I see this school situation with Project Hope, which we just did not too long ago. And you can jump in and do those things. This is an interesting time to have a community group discussion, because talking about money, sometimes we go, oh, I don't want to talk about that. It's a little more awkward. I would encourage you to be authentic, to really talk about money. Talk about what you have, where you spend it, where it goes, and to really encourage each other as well. Like no other time, we need to be managing money wisely during this COVID crisis and during this time in which, well, things are so uncertain. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.